That's for her 60th birthday, so that's what she wants to do. So Blue Ridge, Georgia, yeah. The thing I found out, I got 1 minute left. Is that what you got? Um, I got, when you call to make reservation, no refunds for the month of October because October is so packed. No, that's right. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what she said. Everybody,
Well, that's assuming I threw mine in here somewhere. I'll put it on Do Not Disturb, but here
Yeah, so this kind of worked out as well as what we talked about yesterday and today.
thank you. Morning, everyone. It's 8:30. This is our scheduled workshop for this morning on infrastructure and growth. So we will call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to give us a roll call, please.
This is a public workshop of the Citrus County Board of County Commissioners. This 22nd day of March 2022. In attendance are Chairman Ronald D. Kitchen Jr., First Vice Chair Ruthie Shabaugh, Second Vice Chair Holly Davis, Commissioner Scott Carnahan, County Administrator Randy Oliver, and County Attorney Denise A. Diamond Lynn.
Thank you very much. Mr. Oliver, ready to take
Yes.
us away on this?
Yes, the board asked for a workshop on infrastructure this morning. We have Brian Coleman, who's the county engineer, and Jim Sterling, who handles road maintenance and the field operations here. We put together a slide presentation for you. We have a better handle on what we need to do. There's some things we don't have total costs in for. I think largely this is going to revolve around how do we start funding this now and into the future. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Doug, do you bring the presentation up? Okay. Okay.
There you go.
There it is. All right. I have to read off this. I can't read off the screens there.
It's hard for me to see that too. I think I
Nope.
need to get my eyes
Let's
checked.
continue. Please go ahead.
Yep. Well, Citrus County is no different than any other county or municipality in the state and in the country. We're all suffering with the challenge of keeping our infrastructure up, and you've seen a lot of federal money coming this way to help with our infrastructure, and we've got several grants that we're applying for, and every chance we get, Colleen's team is jumping on those because we really need the money. As we go through this presentation, you'll see that, and you already kind of know that. You hear it from the citizens. There's approximately 800 miles of county maintained road that is currently in the state of needing resurfacing, and you're familiar with the road rating system that we do. We've got staff to go out and rate the roads. Half of it gets done every year, so every 2 years every road is rated, and we rate it 7 or higher if it needs to be resurfaced. And so right now, if you could get a bundle of money, it would be $123 million to resurface all those roads, and that's what's shown in red there. If you wanted to try to get on a 20 to 25 year resurfacing cycle, it'd be about 10 to 14 million a year. And it would still take 20 to 25 years to catch up, because as you're paving those roads, you've got other ones that are starting to deteriorate. And it's interesting because, and the reason why we rate roads every year is because some roads fall apart quicker than others. Sometimes it's due to weather, like the flooding we had this year, and then sometimes it's due to traffic changes on the roads. Funding options that we've discussed here in the past is increasing the millage, and in this county, 1 mil equals about $10 million. Some options are special assessments. The other is a local option sales tax. 1 cent would generate approximately $12 to $16 million.
I would also note, while we're at it, that as it relates to recent flooding damage, if we repair the roads the way they are, it'll be something less than $1 million. If we elevate the roads and correct what I call those deficiencies over time, I think the number was, what was the number, Brian? 14?
23 million. The next slide, we talk about the flooding that we had this year. We got about 45 miles of road that were flooded. If we totally rebuilt those roads, it would be $23 million, and that would be totally rebuilding the roads and trying to get them up out of the water. It would cost significantly less just to put them back. And part of it, we think we need to wait a little bit. There are a couple roads that, yeah, they've fallen apart pretty quick, but the others may not show up for a little while. Sometimes after a flood like that and the base gets soft, sometimes it doesn't bother them, but sometimes it will. So some of these may be showing up. This is the worst case number that we put in here. It is really interesting. Up in Madison County, where I've lived the last 20 years, we have some river flooding. Floods some roads. Sometimes there's no damage. Sometimes there is. The road department did an excellent job this year of trying to keep the roads open while they were flooded and passable. We want to talk a little bit about a balance from our stormwater MSBU. As you know, we went with that this last year, and we eliminated the MSTU. That's actually, there's a typo there. That second line where it says eliminate stormwater MSBU, that should have been a T, the taxing side of it, that 0.1 mil that we reduced. Then road resurfacing, $1 million.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir. Yes,
just
sir.
a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Regarding the stormwater MSBU, is my understanding that by us implementing that, that was going to leave a surplus of money that had been used for stormwater issues in public works of somewhere between about $5 and $6 million. Is that the case? And if so, what is the plan for that money? There had been some discussion. I'd raised the possibility of setting aside some of that annually for the repair of Ozello Trail, or rebuilding Ozello Trail, whatever that turns out to be. But if that surplus is there as a result of that new stormwater MSBU, I'd like to know, about how much is that estimated and what's the plan for it?
Well, that's kind of what this was showing. It's about 2.7 million. So you got
4.8 is the collection from the MSBU. The MSTU had generated 1.1, so we deducted that. And the board previously directed that 1 million of that money go to road resurfacing, and that's how we upped our road resurfacing from 3 to 4 million. And as a result of that, the balance left over is 2.7. There's some projects down there that we're working on. And it can be used for any legal purpose that the board wants. These were some stormwater projects that we're trying to work on to address things, but.
Keep going. Yes, sir. You got.
Yeah, I had inquired with the property appraiser's office prior to us implementing the stormwater MSBU, and they were estimating a little bit north of $6 million is what that was going to generate. That's not the case?
That's not correct. No, sir.
Where did this number come from, the 4.8?
That's what the goal was to generate 4.8.
We
From the
can get with
original.
the tax collector's office and see exactly what it generated. Please remember also, you've got roughly a 5% fee that's charged for collections by the property appraiser and the tax collector for that, but we can get the exact number that was generated last year.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, the original goal was the 4.8 and so that's how we set the rate at what we did.
Okay.
Anything else, Commissioner?
Nope, I'm
Okay.
good, thank you, sir.
Please continue.
Some of the stormwater projects that we're currently working on, y'all probably have gotten a lot of calls about cornflower up in the Crystal Manor area. We've got an engineering firm doing the study on upsizing that culvert under cornflower. And main thing is we've got to assure that we don't have any negative impacts upstream or downstream if we go to upsize that culvert. Another project that we've got underway with our stormwater money is.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Brian, I apologize.
That's okay.
I drove up there, fairly well in the peak of all this flooding, and that culvert that you're talking about, when I went there was, while there was still water backed up, upstream of it, the culvert was not flowing at 100%. So my question is, not an engineer, and I was not at the Holiday Inn last night, but why not, rather than upsizing it and going through all the expense of the study and so forth, can't we just lower the existing culvert that's there to allow that water upstream to flow through and maybe more efficiently utilize the culvert that's there, rather than going through having rather than a 48-inch culvert, having a 60 or 72-inch culvert that's still only flowing at 50%.
Right.
Well, the question, the thing that we need to do from an engineering perspective is to make sure that it doesn't cause any downstream implications. Because if more water goes through, whichever way you want to do it, if more water goes through, then it has the potential to back up at other places as you get closer to the river till it gets out to or gets closer to the Gulf until you get out to the Gulf. That's what the hydraulic study will do.
The current culvert is at the bottom of the stream bed, so if you tried to lower the culvert anymore, we'd have to lower the stream bed. But I was there at a little different time than you were, because the water was actually up over the top of the culvert when I was there, and we tried to catch the peak. I had the surveyors out there surveying, and there's actually 2 foot of head difference, 2 foot of difference from one side of the road to the other, water elevation wise. So it would tell you that if you could put a more culvert capacity under there, you could bring that down, and it would reduce the tailwater conditions upstream, and maybe help give some relief to the people upstream. But at the same time, we don't want to put more water downstream that will cause adverse impacts. We can put more water downstream as long as it doesn't cause adverse impacts to anybody. And part of what the engineering study does is they go downstream in particular, and they survey cross sections of that stream. And they also look at, I think it's Deodor Road. There's another set of culverts down there. And so what they'll do is they'll look at, okay, if I increase the capacity here, what does that do downstream? Does my stream, can my stream handle that, or will it come up out of that stream and affect property owners as it goes downstream? Or will it put Deodor Road underwater? Do I need to upsize the capacity of that as well? So that's the purpose of the study. And you can send more water just as long as there's not adverse impacts to anybody.
Okay, and last question. My understanding is that the last bit of land or real estate that the water needs to cross before hitting the barge canal was a privately owned piece of property, and there was some thought of contacting that owner to possibly acquire that piece of property specifically for the purpose of drainage. Has that contact been made? Is that something we're pursuing?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Larry Brock and I believe Jim also met with the landowners out there. There's actually 2 landowners. A lot of that area is a drainage right of way up until the last little bit that he gives to the river. Right. And Jim and Larry met with one owner, and I met with the uncle of the other owner, and at this point we really can't tell them how it's going to impact them. Okay. You know, will the water, and the one couple they met, they said they really weren't interested in selling, but we really can't tell them Are you gonna get another 6 inches of water, 2 inches of water? You will probably not see an impact, or you're gonna see an impact and we would like to consider buying it. So right now, until you do the study, you really don't, you're kind of shooting from the hip of it, are you gonna have an impact or not?
Okay.
I would note that the house on Cornflower was built on a slab waiver. It was only built at the 100-year floodplain level, which both of those were not a good decision. But that's also adding to the issue.
Yeah, adding to the issue is you can get a slab waiver, which allows you to build below the 100-year floodplain. You don't have to build above the road elevation. And that particular house is having the issues, the most issues, receive that slab waiver. We've kind of told staff that if you receive a slab waiver in Crystal Manor, we need to deny it, because Crystal Manor is not a place that you should have a slab waiver.
Anything else, Commissioner Kennard?
No, sir.
All right, please continue.
Mr.
Commissioner
Chairman.
Slaybach.
Have you gotten? Good morning.
Good morning.
Have you gotten many calls for the area in Crystal River off of Citrus Avenue? It's around anywhere from Emerald Oaks, Pine Bluff to Duncanfield.
Yes.
You know, there was like a section that just, I don't know if it was bedrock, but just didn't drain.
Yes. So there's a big low area up there off of Citrus Avenue.
Yeah.
Right. One of our plans is we'll be mailing out here real soon notices to property owners to see if they're interested in selling portions of their properties. We've got about 35 on the list up in that area and around other places. Our stormwater team is evaluating properties, and we're really not looking for properties that are necessarily the lowest properties, because they already flood, and there's really not much more we can do to help with those. It already floods. What we're looking for is properties that are a little further up the hill, but they're on that edge, and if you can imagine, so we can dig them out to make more storage area, so the water doesn't get as high. If you think about it, if you got a pond full of water, it doesn't do you any good to dig deeper in that pond, because it's still full of water. It's the groundwater table, basically. But if you can get out on the sides and you can dig out, well, then you're making more storage for the flood water that comes. And what we're looking at as part of our plan for resiliency is to try to get our roads built up. And Citrus Avenue is one of those prime examples. That one where it has the big oak trees, beautiful big oak trees area there. And of course, those big live oak flats are notorious for flooding. When you see that, you go, oh man, that's going to be a wet area one day. But if we can get around the edges of those places, we can dig them out. So when we raise the road, we have a responsibility that when we raise the road, we're basically filling in the floodplain. So we have to go outside there and dig areas so we don't cause more flooding. So we're contacting specific properties that would fit that bill. And while it may be a year or two before we go to looking at raising the road, we're going ahead and trying to acquire properties that would fit that bill. And that's not the only place. There's 2 or 3 other places around the county that the road needs to come up, and we're looking at trying to acquire those properties. One is over on the Hog Pond, Lake Nina. There's a spot there that we could raise the road up, and we're also looking at a couple vacant lots there that we could do the same thing. Offset the storage. As we bring that fill in, we have to offset that storage of water.
The other thing that I would mention, this hadn't come up yet, but if you're familiar with Hourglass subdivision, that's basically a big bowl, if you will, in the middle of the county. As a result, we have property in there, but what it's going to take to rectify that is to essentially install a lift station like Ken uses for sewer to pump the water out of there to someplace else. On those particular unique situations like that, we're going to recommend that you create a municipal services benefit unit that will be specifically for that subdivision, because it only benefits that subdivision, and it's above and beyond what we can do with the stormwater. but we think that it's in the best interest because, I mean, it can rain not very much and Hourglass subdivision is impacted.
Yeah, that's the one currently road maintenance has to set a pump up to pump out across the golf course there. And we've got the engineering group looking at that right now to see what size of pump it would be. We're also looking to see if we could do it by gravity feed. If we can do it by gravity feed, that would be the best. You really don't want to have to rely on pumps, but if we can't do it by gravity, then we'll look at doing a pump.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Sir, please continue.
All right, Doug, can we go to the next slide, please? Shifting gears a little bit, we'll talk about guardrails. The top photo in this is a guardrail over on the Dunellen Road, going from Red Level up to Dunellen. That's what it looked like about a year and a half ago. Most of the guardrails that we have were built by the state DOT. A lot of our county roads, most of the old county roads, were at one time owned by DOT. And in an agreement several years ago, back 40, 50 years ago, a lot of those roads transferred to the counties. So a lot of this guardrail was built by the state and has been in place ever since, and is in, some of it's in a state of deterioration, as you can see in this photo. The other thing is most of them nowadays, most of those old ones do not meet the current standards for guardrails. The bottom picture is the new guardrail in place that replaced the one in the above picture. And as you can see, there's a lot more to a guardrail system today than there was back then. Before, it was just a concrete post stuck in with a wooden block in between, and the purpose of the wooden block is to kind of tear apart when you hit the guardrail. And now they still use a wooden block, and sometimes they use kind of a plastic block in between them. That's still part of it, but there's also additional engineering that goes in with cables and other things to help make a better guardrail system. It's kind of interesting. Guardrails are interesting because they actually create a hazard themselves, but they're to protect you from a worse hazard. So you really don't want to put a guardrail if you don't have to. The only reason why you put it there is because the consequences of going off is worse than hitting the guardrail. And there's some places in the county that we think as we start to improve our guardrail systems that we might be able to do something. And in this case, if you notice in that bottom picture, what they're trying to protect you from is that drop off. You see that where the culvert, this is a culverted spot in the road. They're protecting you from that drop off. Going over, if the car goes over there and rolls upside down, it's trying to protect you from that. There are places where what we can do is we can extend those culverts out and put tapers on them. And so when you go off, you don't go off and roll over. So sometimes when we analyze these guardrail systems, we can maybe do a cure that will keep us from having to put the guardrail back. Sometimes that's better long term and safer because the guardrail again is right there on the road and will hit, and you can hit it and actually cause damage. But it's to protect you from the worst hazard. But if we can mitigate the worst hazard, then we don't have to put the guardrail back. But this last year we've gone through and we have 192 sections of guardrail out there that we need to work on to bring up the standard. And if you had to cash today, it would be $38 million. But over the next 40 years, we need to start upgrading these guardrails. You'll see in our capital improvement projects, we're starting to put in this particular guardrail was a couple $100,000, so we're starting to put in a couple $100,000 to $500,000 for guardrail improvements. The next situation we want to talk about is the loss of shoulders on Ozello. Commissioner Kennard had mentioned Ozello. The top picture is a picture of Ozello, and over time, especially where these ditches were dug, when they built the roads, they dug along the side for fill material, and what's happened is the tide moves in and out of those spots, and every time it carries a little bit of material with it over the years. And the rain runs off the road, and it just keeps carrying material with it. And so our shoulders up there are getting narrower and narrower and narrower. And we want to go back and reestablish that. Also, storm surges play a big part of that. The bottom picture is Dixie Shores area, and this was done. I don't know what year this was done. Was this done before you, Jim? Yeah. And you've been here 3.5. This was done. Walt did this project, and basically they had put some GeoWeb. Walt designed it and had road maintenance install it, but it's GeoWeb with rock material in there, and that stabilizes it. So when it keeps the fine materials from washing out of the road shoulder. And you can even see some mangroves coming in there now, which will help also hold the shoulder. But to do the areas of Ozello, we've got approximately 3 miles of road shoulders to do at an estimated cost of $4.4 million. We've got an engineering firm right now kind of finalizing the cost, and also they've been talking to some of the permitting agencies about doing this as a maintenance project.
The other option is to use sheet pile. However, that option's a little more expensive, and it has issues of its own, but sheet pile works very well also.
Yeah, sheet piling would be an excellent alternative, but the cost would be enormous.
Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
good morning. How does
Morning.
that work with, what we're needing to do with rebuilding that road or the total resiliency plan on Ozello? Do we do this first because it needs to be done right now, and is it wasted work in the larger scheme?
No, I
if
don't
we do
believe it
more
will.
things?
I don't believe it will be wasted work. Resiliency will take years, of course, to implement everything we want to do. But we definitely need to go ahead and get our shoulders stabilized now.
Okay.
And if for one day we decide to build the road up, we still need our shoulders that we are trying to protect today. So I think it'd be a good investment today.
The other option that we need to, and that was the region we were trying to get Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council with one of their grants to do a study, because we're different than the Tampa area. And by that, I mean, they've got much higher values. But, from our standpoint on the infrastructure, if you go in and raise the road 2 feet, you're going to throw that water someplace else. It's going to cause a dam effect between the two sides. You got to make sure it gets back and forth. But that doesn't do anything for the properties that are out there, because they're still sitting low. Okay, and we're precluded from doing anything with private property. Well, in areas that you have very high assessed values, commercial buildings or whatever, you got a totally different option. But the question becomes, what's the economics of it? I mean, compared to the cost and what the property owner is going to have to do versus what the total cost of real estate are versus improvements. So that was one of the reasons we were trying to get the Regional Planning Council to take a look at this area, because we're much, much different because of that factor.
Okay. Any other questions on Ozello? All right, Doug, go to the next slide, please. Let's talk about bridges. Each year we put in our budget $50,000 for bridge repairs, and these are, as you know, $50,000 isn't a lot of money when it comes to repairing infrastructure, but this helps us seal up cracks in the bridges. And Jim's team at the road maintenance does a lot of this work in-house. So they go out, clean off the bridges, and seal up the cracks and keep water from getting down into the steel. So there's steel in that concrete, and when you start to get cracks in it, the water can get down in the crack and get down to the steel and rust the steel, and that's when the bridge starts to fall apart. As long as you can keep that water out of that and keep it away from the steel, we can lengthen the life of the bridge significantly. So this small $50,000 is for that, just sealing cracks and doing minor repairs to the bridges. On the next slide, you'll see larger repairs that are being planned for. This is Museum Point Bridge, and this bridge has been repaired many times over the years, and like everything, takes continuous maintenance. There's jackets, those square areas that you see in the top picture down right at the edge of the water. There's square areas around the pilings. Those are pile jackets to try to protect the pilings. The bottom picture is a close-up view of that. You can see where the grout has fallen away from the edge there, sealing it up. And there's even actually more areas of the whole jacket starting to come apart. So these will need to be taken apart and cleaned. This bridge will need to be sandblasted. The steel portions of it will need to be sandblasted and painted. We have Kimberly Horn currently putting together a scope of work that we'll be putting out for bid on this. So the cost is unknown at this time, but also the bridge is an older one, so it's got lead paint. So there'll have to be mitigation taken in. You know, they have to put big screens up and catch all that material. They can't just let it go into the water. So of course the cost goes up when you have to sandblast and deal with lead paint. But it needs to be done to protect the bridge.
We've also been very fortunate that, for example, on the Halls River Bridge, the state came in and paid to replace that bridge. So timing and coordination with the state's of utmost importance, particularly when you get to bridge replacement.
Yes, and we're also looking at the Ozello bridges. The same firm is also looking at the three main Ozello bridges to look at what we need to do to keep them up. Part of that also involves diving them to check for the bottoms where they enter the soil at the bottom, trying to look to see what needs to be done down there as well. Next slide, Doug. Sidewalks. We also, each year, we put in $100,000 worth of sidewalk repairs. You can see this one has cracks in it. It's not the crack that causes you the problem, but it's where it starts to heave and separate. It's hard to see in that picture from where you're sitting, but you know, actually I think the guy's doing that out here this morning. I saw him working. I think he's grinding sidewalks out here, trying to bring those cracks down. Where we can, we do that. We try to grind them. Where we can't grind them, we have to cut those spots out and replace them. Sidewalks are great for the community, but they do take maintenance.
And we would also note that we have a number of trails that we've accepted responsibility for. Right now, they're new and don't take a lot of maintenance. For example, on the Sun Coast, over there on 41, there's a trail. As I say, in the first 10, 15, 20 years, they won't take much maintenance, but at some point in the future, they're going to take maintenance and replacement.
Yep. But they sure are a great amenity. I've used the Suncoast Trail now that it's open, and man, that is nice. Very pretty. But it does take maintenance. Next, Doug, is we want to talk a little bit. Just Randy said he's putting in about $200,000 for a needs study. This is just a photograph of where we're at here at the courthouse in Inverness. And we highlighted the government buildings around us, Stovall Building, the Sheriff's Department, the Coke Building. And one of the ideas that's been floated is to build a multi-story building adjacent to the Coke Building and the courthouse, and maybe have ground floor parking, and then the upper stories would be office or judicial complex. So everything's connected. The more we can connect everything, I think the sheriff said that it would take additional bailiffs and stuff if you start having separate buildings. You got to have separate security, and also there's logistics of being able to move people around within the building. So it might make sense to have them connected. But I believe we're looking at having a consultant come in to help us walk through some of that process, to give us some ideas and to give us some cost on that. Is there any other ideas on that y'all would like to kind of throw out there about the space needs of the county? Okay.
Well, you know, I'll just chime in and say, we know what we have to do. The trick is always, how do you pay for it? You know,
Right.
that's always the question. So the question is always gonna come back to that. The thing with the building, I'll be curious about this, because the board has adopted a policy that says for the future space requirements, we were gonna take the returned excess fees from the constitutional officers and put that into a fund. Now I've noticed that the sheriff is no longer returning his excess fees, so I'm just wondering if that fund now will ever have a chance of growing without that happening, because that was one of the things that we talked about. You know, the judges wanted more space. We knew the concept of a multi-story building was going to be expensive, but one of the things we tried to do was identify a reoccurring funding source. So I guess I'm just saying it kind of becomes a little disheartening, because when you take a proactive step to get something moving in the right direction, we don't always have control over everything it takes to do that. So, and I guess there's really nothing we can do about that. I mean, if the sheriff just doesn't want to give back his excess fees like other sheriffs have done in the past, he isn't required to, correct?
That's correct, as long as he does that. And I would note that the state loosened the requirements on how the sheriff departments can move money around to make it so that the county even has a little less control than they did before.
And therein, again, if I had the answer, you would have heard it long ago. But the whole problem comes down to is always a moving target. You know, that what the citizens would do is they would pay for what they want. It's the problem that we get into is we tell the citizens, well, we're just going to raise your taxes to do this, and then we don't do what we tell them we're going to do. And then what they're stuck with is a tax increase that never goes away, but the work never gets done that they were promised they were going to get. So my thinking is as you move forward, and really I think the plan that you have so far is the best we can do with what we have, which is allocate an X amount per year for ongoing maintenance or whatever. But I don't think we're ever going to get in front of the capital plan until we've come up with some kind of reoccurring revenue source to pay for that. The half-cent sales tax has been talked about, but again, the same thing. I mean, the citizens are very resistant to that because the way past boards have not listened to them and spent money that they told them they weren't going to. So the same thing. You know, here again, we say we were going to do this, and it doesn't get done. So I guess it's just kind of frustrating, and that's where it's going to come down to. So the easy thing to do is always increase taxes, but that hasn't fixed things in the past. You know, every time they've increased taxes in the past with promises of things getting better, they don't. You know, that money gets sucked up someplace else. So I think the only way that any of this is ever gonna, it's like Commissioner Kennard just brought it up. You know, one way we're told this much money, another way we're told that much money. Well, then what happened to it? You know, it's hard. So if we set the policy based on funding, if the funding doesn't occur, then the policy is really no good. You know, so we almost have to kind of go back to square one and say, what is a real number for the reoccurring revenue that can be, you know, allocated to that project? So I guess that's going to be the bigger discussion that, you know, I mean, you guys are doing a great job with what we have to work with, and but and again, my hope has always been, like we talked about the bike trail down Fort Island Trail, that the state will replace those bridges eventually, and that'll take care of that issue. But I don't think that's going to affect the issue on Ozella Road or whatever. And it still comes from the same thing. And let's just keep this in mind too, as kind of a segue. There's a lot of talk out there that people wanting to push anybody over 65 to not have to pay taxes in Citrus County. Well, if that does, I think you're going to have about, 14 people in Citrus County paying all the taxes. And so if you're going to up everybody's taxes, then what's that do to everything? You know, so there's all these, you know, you talked about unintended consequences downstream from engineering. It's the same thing with budgeting. You know, whatever we try to do to deal with one issue is going to have effects somewhere downstream on other people. So I guess we just have to have a bigger vision of this as we move into it. That's my comments. Anything? Yes, sir.
Yeah, the one thing that this does not take into account, and we've been pretty successful on getting the state participation on it, but like with the new subdivision that's gonna come online, at some point, the 973 units, I don't know how quickly, but clearly that road can't handle it out there. And we've been able to partner with the MPO and the state as it relates to expansion of that, but impact fees don't cover, the county does not have concurrency. Concurrency is one that provides for that you assess the impacts on-site and off-site. So we need to keep those things in mind. Cardinal's going to be another area that's going to increase at some point in the future. I think state participation in there is a given because it's right there at the interchange. So I think we'll look very favorably there. I don't know over there, you know, where the new subdivision at Rock Crusher is going, whether there's going to be a lot of interest by the state in that, because they're going to see that, I think, largely as a development road.
So Mr. Elder and the other folks here assembled, it was my remembrance that when we dropped concurrency, when the state did, that we were told that we had procedures and policies in place that we could protect against these types of issues. Do we or don't we?
No.
So a developer wants to put in 1 million houses on a one-lane road, and there's no protections that we have in place to make sure that the traffic issue is addressed.
That is correct. If it's an off-site, what's called an off-site improvement. We can require the turn lanes and things like that, center turn lane, right turn lane, decel, XL. We can require that going into the subdivision, but any requirement to improve the infrastructure to get there, no, we don't have a tool.
Okay. Unintended consequences, right? Okay, what else we have?
I think that's it. As we show in this presentation, I mean, the real limitation is funding.
Right.
And it's going to be a question of how we get to the funding. I think these numbers are pretty aggressive, but according to the state, if we had a 1 cent local option sales tax today, it's anticipated it would generate $18 million next year. A half cent obviously be half of that, $9 million. So, but you know, it all boils down to how do we best apply the resources we've got to do what needs to be done.
And again, you know, it might not fly in short term, but, and I'll just put my 2 cents in here, what everybody else has to say, but, you know, as far as I'm concerned, and I've been looking at this for many years, well, I consider many years, the sales tax option is the best way to deal with it. But we can't force the citizens to do it. And that still comes back to trust, you know, so I do know that the other counties that have adopted it, their citizens continually re-adopt it, because they have demonstrated to their citizens they're using the money for which they said they were going to use it for. So it's going to be a heavy lift, but the whole point of that would be, I would prefer, because the problem you have with ad valorem taxes is they never go away. Once they go up, they never go away, and the people that are complaining about the roads being you know, fixed are the ones that once the road's fixed, they're going to say, why am I paying higher taxes for the rest of my life since my road just got fixed? Where a sales tax, every tourist that comes here, you know, is going to pay that. And they drive on the bridges and they go on the roads. But again, it may be the best plan, but it's up to the citizens to implement it, and the case has got to be made to the citizens why it would benefit them, and it's not just another tax. So that, again, we've talked about. It's going to be an educational process. And so anyway, that's my 2 cents. What's the other commissioners have to say? Commissioner Carnahan.
Well, Randy, why can't we take the new construction growth, the revenue that's coming in from new construction, and set that aside and earmark it for infrastructure? You know, I've been preaching infrastructure for 7.5 years up here, and we continue to just push it off. And unfortunately, you just hit a minute part of infrastructure of what this county has to deal with. So there's millions and millions and millions of more dollars that have to go into infrastructure that's already here, not counting what has to be done in the future with the developments that are coming.
You can do that. The only problem with that is that when you increase the population, say 50,000 ultimately, or whatever it is, that increased revenue is needed for, I mean, we've added staff to be able to accommodate that. We've added park programming, things like that. The sheriff should be adding deputies with the new growth money over time. And the new growth money is needed to provide those services that those people want.
No, I understand, but also with new growth, we have to start putting money aside to deal with infrastructure issues. Because again, we're behind the eight ball. I mean, big time. And if we don't start earmarking some money, whether it comes from new growth or wherever it comes from, we're never going to get in front of this. Because I think everybody knows that they look at the traffic issues that Citrus County has today. And these roads are going to have to be, one fixed, widened. The county's got a big burden in front of them. So we've got to start earmarking some money from somewhere to deal with these issues.
Well, we have the budget kickoff
Yes.
this afternoon, so that can be
That's going
part
to
of
be,
that
I will be
discussion.
bringing that up, yes.
Are you
I'm done.
yes, Commissioner Slabaugh?
This is one reason why with new growth that I have never been a supporter of rollback. Because when you have that new growth and then you roll it back, we're getting behind each time. And so I'm probably gonna be on the losing end of it, but, that is why I will not support rollback. And thank you. I'm done.
Okay. And we should be clear what rollback is. So I bet if you asked every person up here what rollback is, you may get a different answer. So before we just say rollback, we should have a discussion of what we're talking about. Yes, sir, Commissioner Kennard.
I think it'd be helpful to know what is the number that's needed. I've heard different numbers about what's needed for road resurfacing. How much annually should the county be setting aside for these various infrastructure repairs? Do we need 10 million a year? Do we need 12 million a year? As Commissioner Carnahan suggested, we could certainly take the tax revenue from all new growth and set that aside, but and then Randy replied that, well, you've got to increase the number of staff out here, you've got to increase the number of deputies, you got to increase the number of EMTs. So if you just set this pot of money aside, the end result is the same. Your millage rate is going to have to go up to support all the services that are required due to that excess or additional growth.
Well, the easiest one to answer that question with, we don't have the refined numbers on this, but is road resurfacing. We need 10 to 14 million to get on a 20 to 25 year cycle. The biggest variable on that is the cost of asphalt and petroleum. But we need that. 18 million on sales tax is what it gives you. It would take roughly a 2 mil increase in the tax rate to give you 20 million, but that would put you at the cap, if you will. We're capped at 10 mils.
But that doesn't answer the question. The question is, how much is needed annually to cover the infrastructure needs of the county?
The only one I can answer with certainty right now for future is the fact that we need 10 to 14 million for road resurfacing, and we've been grappling with this for a number of years. That number is etched in stone. We can develop better numbers, but, to look at the long term. And we can come up with that figure for you.
Yeah, I think particularly as we move into talking about the budget, we need to know that we're behind the eight ball, 16 million a year in infrastructure repairs. That we've got to find that money, and if it's not a matter of finding it, it's a matter of creating that revenue to take care of these things.
Okay, we can do that.
All right, thank you.
And you could just take some of the round numbers they put in the presentation and add them up, and pretty close to 100 million right off the top, right there, it looked like.
Well, that's not annually.
No, but what I'm saying, you're gonna have to put something aside. Well, it's gotta have to be kind of like a sinking fund. You're gonna have to say, we put this much away for something that needs to be replaced in 2 years. But I guess the issue will be, is it gonna need to be replaced in 2 years or 5 years or 1 year? And, that's gonna dictate the speed at which the money needs to be accumulated to do it, right? So-
Yeah, I would think, you know, that it takes, certainly it takes some number crunching, but we should have a number. I mean, there should be a number presented to the board and saying, you can try to keep your taxes at this level all that you want, but you need to create an additional $18 million to take care of your infrastructure. If you're not doing that, your infrastructure repairs are going backwards. And we can all talk about how we support it and preach about it up here, but if we don't fund it, we're just blowing hot air, quite frankly.
And it's gonna change, because we're not talking about the future value of money either, you know. What did it cost to build a house a year ago, what's it cost now, right? So we're saying 14 million today, the 14 we need today, 5 years from now might be 20 million, you know, so, that's the other thing, so, yes, sir.
The one other thing that I would point out is like, as it relates to future space requirements, I mean, we don't know what that number's gonna be. Okay, so that one I can't give you a real estimate on until everybody sits down, there's a planning exercise done that says this is what's needed, you know, 10, 20 years out, and that comes up with. So, I mean, the one that we have the greatest handle on right now is roads. We've got that pretty well delineated. We can do that on some of the other things, to a lesser extent on flooding, but on space needs, I can't tell you at all right now, I don't know.
And again, yes, sir, go ahead.
Well, and another thing is look at how the property values have risen. Okay, so we're getting a lot more income from property values. You know, houses that are worth 200,000 are selling for 400,000 today, and you know you're paying them taxes on that. So this board or the next board needs to make a decision on whether you're going to take new growth money and set it aside for infrastructure, or how are you going to fund it. But it's got to be funded, and I agree with Commissioner Kennard. You got to come up with a number. But I'm telling you, with the developments that are coming and the upgrades that we're gonna have to do on county roads, we're not even, I mean, we're way up there. And I'm gonna throw one more out that I had a discussion yesterday. You know, God bless G. McGee and the Senator and Ralph Pizzulo and all the money that the county has coming in. Guys, you're gonna have to match some of that money, and you're gonna have to put some money aside to match that, and I'm not sure where that money's gonna come from. So, you know, the county's got a big issue in front of them, and we've got to come up with a plan. Somebody does.
Well, you know, again, I think you have to have a plan, then you have to stick with it. So if you look at one issue and you say, again, let's say the future space requirements, if the policy is we allocate this revenue source that we talked about before that, then it's gonna take the discipline to fund that and put that money in there and not spend it. So like, as of right now, we don't know what that number is gonna be, but we know every day that we put money away towards it, there's that much more there when we need it, you know? So, it's kind of like saving for, I don't know, your kid's college education. You don't know what it's gonna be, but if you don't start saving for it, you're not gonna have it when the time comes, you know? So, yeah, we know it's gonna be a large number, but I think the whole thing has gotta be, there's gotta be some kind of discipline put in place to say, when we set the money aside for this, that's what it's for. And really, it's just gonna have to come down to some kind of spending discipline, because it's easy when you're spending other people's money to say, give us more, give us more, give us more. But if that money doesn't go to what you promised the people it was gonna go for, then we end up where we were before. So, and let me just say one more thing about, as we get into it later on today, this whole thing about rollback. Just keep this in mind. If the county didn't grow one more person, okay, let's pick a number. Let's say we're at 150,000 people right now, and we don't grow one more person, and next year we're at 150,000 people, okay? The need for county services has not increased, okay? It's the same number. But if property values doubled and you didn't go with rollback, then you're collecting twice the money that you did last year, okay? So people are paying more for the same service. So why would people want to pay more just because their property went up in value when they're not getting anything else for it, okay? So keeping that in mind, what we said was that new growth isn't included in that. So if you had 150,000 people here and at rollback and they're getting the same service and they're paying for it, and you get 5,000 new people and you need a couple new deputies and you need some of this or whatever, then that new growth should be paying for that, okay? Then you come in and you say, well, now, even at rollback, even if the people stayed, the number stayed the same, there's inflation. Well, we've adjusted for that, and we've included it 5% for inflation. So, you know, the whole thing is just to say, because some big liberal organizations say, set it and forget it when it comes to millage, because then you can always point to the citizens and say, we didn't raise your taxes, the millage rate is still the same. That is, it's a tax increase, and even the state recognizes that. So people will pay more if they're paying for what they want. That's the bottom line, you know. So that's when it comes back, when we've said in the past, will you pay more for EMS? Yes. Will you pay more for fire? Yes. Now we have to say, will you pay more for bridges? Will you pay more for guardrails? Will you pay more for sidewalks? And will you pay more for road resurfacing? And that's the question. So it's going to take a lot of political fortitude, too, because the folks sitting up here tend to have a little bit more information and background than the average person on the street that'll say, just find it. You know, well, that's easy to say, but that's hard to do. So, but that's what the budget discussion is going to all be about, because this was a good thing to have this morning, because these are good numbers to have in the back of our mind when we start talking about spending on this and spending on that. Then we can come back and say, okay, so now we're at least 10 million a year in the hole just for roads, right? Because we're at 4 and we're told we need 14, so let's just pick that number to start with. We're 10 million in the hole every year just on roads. Yes, Commissioner Kennard.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I heard correctly or not, but I think what I heard from Commissioner Slaybaugh is that, given the situation that we're in, and I believe that situation is that county government has been negligent in taking care of our infrastructure. We've not done a good job, not just this board, but previous boards, of funding our infrastructure repairs, our maintenance. You know, one of the answers that I got during all the flooding that took place up in my district this past summer was, you know, back during the tough years of 2008 or whenever it was, county government staff was cut 150 some odd people or 140 some odd people. We do not have the manpower to be out there cleaning these ditches, cleaning this out, taking care of this, all the stuff that's required to make sure we can move stormwater efficiently out of the county up to the barge canal and so forth. So I think anyway, where Commissioner Slaybaugh was going with it is that we're way behind in funding these infrastructure repairs. Why would we even begin the budget discussion with rollback? It's not adding new services, it's doing something that we should be doing, and that's gonna require funding. You're right, it's gonna take some intestinal fortitude to look the taxpayers in the eye and say, I'm sorry, no, we're not adding new services, but what we are doing is taking care of things that should have been done 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. These things have to be done. I don't think that you go out and ask people if they want to repair the bridges in the county. That's our job. You know, we can't allow these things to just fall apart and then, you know, let another board down the road say, go see if you can get it from the state. I think we try and get everything we can from the state, but I think we have our responsibility to take care of the infrastructure problems.
And I would say that, you know, that's a true statement, what you said, but also keep this in mind. In 2014, that's what the board told the citizens. They said, hey, the county never kept up with everything, so we're going to raise your taxes 31%, and that's going to fix everything. And it didn't. So everybody's taxes was raised 31%, nothing changed, okay, except their taxes went up 31%. They were told the county's been living on the cheap, they haven't been charging what it costs to run the county, so now we're going to bite the bullet, we're going to raise your taxes 31%, and nothing's changed. So my argument is what you said is correct, but without the fortitude to spend that money on the way that you tell the taxpayers you're going to spend it,
Right.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
So every person every time the word tax increase is said, people said, look at 2014. What'd you do with that 31%? You know? And so that's the first question that's going to come up.
Yeah, understood.
All
Mr.
right.
Chairman?
Yes.
So, Randy, just rough, one time, pass through, I came up with about, to do all this annually, 21 million. Again, just one pass through. So, and that includes the 14 million for the roads. So, we just have to look at that when we do the budget and figure out, okay, if we really wanted to start today with, what was the one that was 40 years, the
Guardrail.
guardrails. So, you know, that million a year towards guardrails, but, that's where I'm at, so, a starting point
Well,
for that.
you've got some other things too. I mean, as it relates to space needs.
Oh,
that
I
we-
didn't include that, I'm
We
sorry.
don't know, but if you're gonna do a project of that magnitude, clearly, you know, that would have to be a consideration.
Yeah, I just didn't know how to
And
break that
I
down.
don't have an idea on that
Yeah.
one. Cost.
Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Davis.
I completely agree with Commissioner Kennard. This is our duty and responsibility to maintain the assets that we already have. That's, in my mind, that's sort of job one in running a good business and being fiscally prudent is to take care of the assets that you already have and you don't let them fall into repair. So I am not of a mindset of set it and forget it on the millage rate. However, I do not think that this year of all years, this is not the year to start the conversation with rollback. Not at all. We need to figure out what we need to do to actually take care of what we have. And as a reminder, I have to be walking out the door in 10 minutes for the poverty simulator.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments?
Again, we got all this money coming in from new construction, okay? We got all this money coming in from property values soaring through the roof, okay? Look at on the water, you know, a house that used to be $500,000, now you forget it. It's $1.2 million, $1.3 million, and so I mean, we've got plenty of revenue coming in, to this county. The bottom line is you gotta, figure out what's important and what's not important, and you gotta set the money aside. And so, you know, when we sit up here and we talk about, let's don't go to rollback, you know, rollback saves a citizen, what, $25 or something like that, because you got homestead and things like that, but, you know, then you got, commercial property values, so, anyway, so there's plenty of money coming into this county, we just gotta get, to what's important and what's not important.
Yes, Commissioner Slagle.
So, Commissioner Carnahan, are you saying that what we're gonna generate from the new growth, just taking that money and putting it aside to a dedicated fund
For
for
infrastructure.
infrastructure?
Mhm.
Okay. I like that idea.
I mean, you know, that new growth is coming, look at the homes, we just did a 954. I think there's, you know, these new developments are coming in, you know, I hear Lenore Homes has a contract on land and, you know, different pieces of property. So new growth is coming, and new growth, that money should be taken in for infrastructure because, you know, rock crusher is gonna have to be upgraded. All these roads are gonna have to be upgraded. We're talking about infrastructure that we already have, but we're not even talking about what we're gonna have to upgrade. But, you know, again, this is my last budget, so, you know, I'm gonna do what I think, I'm gonna do what the citizens elected me to do, and others might have a different idea, but that's fine, but, you know, Citrus County has plenty of money coming in, and they have probably this year with new growth is a lot of money coming, plus property value, so. You have the floor, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I was going to say impact fees, when the argument was made to eliminate impact fees, that was the argument. New growth pays for itself. You don't need impact fees because all the new growth will pay for the new need for infrastructure. So it all depends on what side of the argument you're on. You know, this is where this is always going to come down. I've kind of just I've become fatigued with this argument. But 7.5 years ago, I proposed the concept of the commissioner's savings account.
Yep.
What was supposed to happen was we budget $10 for something, and at the end of the year, we only spend $5. So that other $5 was supposed to go into the commissioner's savings account. And then at the end of the year, that's the money that we use for capital, or we gave it back to the citizens if it wasn't identified by buying down the millage rate, okay? That went away. Right now, before us, we're gonna see later today, the true-up is really the money that used to go into the commissioner's savings account. So now we have, quote, $5 million of found money, so let's spend it this way, let's spend it that way, and let's spend it that way. So in the course of 7.5 years, we've gone from saving every 50 cents that we didn't have to spend and giving back to the citizens because we over budget. We know, and I've asked this in the past, the state says you can only budget for 95%. When's the last time we didn't get what we budgeted for? We get what we get and more, okay? When we budget, look at all the positions that we funded this year, fully funded that we didn't fill. All that money now is gonna come up in true up, okay? So you're right, we have plenty of money that come in, but what we keep doing is finding creative ways of spending it and hiding it down in here in the budget. And I've always said, I've said it from day one, I said this when I was in Crystal River, the most profound thing that this five people sitting up here can do is go into other people's pocket and take money out of it, okay? Period. We have the authority to go and say, you will give us your money, period, or we'll take your property. That is an amazing responsibility, okay? So I've never taken that lightly, and where we get into the problem is when we start saying, well, you know, we need to do this, we need to do that, and then we don't give it back to what we told them. So when we tell them we need $10 for paper clips, and we tax them $10 for paper clips, and we only needed 2, we tax them $8 too much.
Yeah.
Okay? So my whole argument from day one would be if we would budget for what we actually spent and what we actually think we're gonna need, then we would have the money there to do what we need to do. So again, I've said this, you guys know it, for 7.5 years, so this is my last budget too, so I'm gonna say it one more time. But that's what we gotta keep in mind. This isn't about, you know, oh, I think this is a good idea, let's do it, because we're spending other people's money. So, and people want their money spent just like they would spend it. They want it spent knowing that if we tell them we have to take $20 because that's what fire costs, they better see that $20 go in fire. That's the bottom line. So, anything else, commissioners, till we go to open to the public? Okay, I don't see the commissioners. Anything else? Anyone here that would like to address the board? Yes, sir. Please come up. Jeff, would you mind doing that?
Nope, not at all.
Thank you. Mr. Hall, are you here on behalf of the builders?
Yes, I'm already doing her.
Okay, so Mr. Hall gets 5 minutes. Thank you for the presentation, by the way. It was very good, very well done, so.
Gaston, when you get back up there, can you set the little time up on the podium there?
So my name is Gaston Hall. I'm here representing the Citrus County Building Alliance. Just to correct the thing, Building Alliance has supported impact fees since the early 90s. We are very aware when we do development and building, if the infrastructure doesn't stay with us, we're not going to be able to do it and sell it to the public. So infrastructure is very important to us. Impact fees are one way of paying for it. For the last 8 years plus, we have talked about not doing the rollback and putting that money back into infrastructure, because what we consider is the new growth, the new construction that we build is new money into the budget. That needs to be set aside, just like impact fees, to cover the infrastructure needs. So we have a request here today that you all basically take the new growth money, and we've gone back 9 years and calculated what's new growth, and take that money and put it into an infrastructure account, only to be used for infrastructure, treated like impact fees. Can be spent for anything as opposed to impact fees. As far as extra money needed in the budget to offset your 5% growth, as he said, reselling of existing homes, reselling of existing properties, addition to existing homes, addition to commercial stuff, is a large number also that is being looked at in the budget. That money will easily cover your 5% growth. So you've got sources to put in new money into the infrastructure. You've got sources to put money into your budget to cover the 5% needed or more now. We all know it's going to be more than 5% this year. But if you look at the money that came in over the last 8 years of just new construction, and you left millions on the table, millions. It's very easy to calculate. I mean, tax assessor did it for us. So we look at the numbers, look at what you could generate, look at what we left on the table. There's tons of money there to cover infrastructure. And rollback. I've been here since '85. My taxes have gone up very little. The 31% was nothing. I mean, I pay a minimal amount, what I consider, from '85 to current, is not even 31% over that entire span of my house being here. So the rollback is need to be eliminated. Has been for the last 8 years. The growth coming is unbelievable. We don't have the infrastructure covered to cover that growth. We're gonna have a problem here very soon if we don't start putting large sums of money aside and spending it and planning for the future. And when that money gets into that infrastructure account, don't whittle it away for stuff that's not infrastructure, that's not needed. I mean, just put it in there, keep it in there, spend it wisely. Don't put it to other projects. I mean, just set that account up with a mandate. It only can be spent for infrastructure. Then bring the projects and approve them just like you do your impact fee projects. So please read our letter. Please understand. Please put the money in the infrastructure, because if not, we're all going to be in trouble here very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Gaston,
Yes, sir.
can you put that timer up on the podium, sir?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the board this time? Yes, sir. Please come forward.
Morning, Commissioners. Bill Hunter from Pine Ridge, not speaking for Pine Ridge. And I apologize, I didn't get the memo. I'm late, so I didn't see the early part of the presentation about roads. And with the immensity of what you're addressing here, and thank you for saying a lot of what you said, I have a very small, itty-bitty thing to talk about, but it's important to Pine Ridge. 84% of our road miles need to be repaved. And I'm not an engineer, but I'm told that as the road surface reaches the end of its life, it deteriorates more rapidly. In the previous survey, we had no condition 10 roads. This current survey, we've got 6.65 miles of condition 10 roads. That's maximum deterioration. I'm told, Larry Brock told me that his rule of thumb was rebuilding a road cost $1 million a mile. It's about 5 times what it would cost to resurface it. So delaying when you hit a condition 10 is not a prudent move. And I understand that you can't repave all the roads at once, and what you're talking about is solutions. Those are long-term solutions. They're not going to occur quickly. And part of the problem is the criteria includes density. Density benefits small lots. It doesn't benefit big lots, large lots like Pine Ridge. Pine Ridge is at the bottom of the priority silo. The roads just don't get paved there. And that tsunami is moving to 10. We're looking at a lot more condition 10 roads. So there are 123 homes on this 6.65 miles, and the property value is $35 million. These people are working hard to try to keep up their property values, and the roads are not going to help. Those condition 10. So here's my ask. Here's the ask. Please take a look at density. And I know it's an effective way to use limited funding, but when a road gets to condition 10, maybe there ought to be another way to think about it, because what you're really trying to do is preserve the surface so that you don't have to rebuild it. So again, with everything you're talking about, this is a really tiny little thing, but it's important, and it will save a lot of money in the long run. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For the discussion you had today.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. We appreciate it. Anyone else wish to address the board? Anyone else? Okay, we will close the public input. Commissioners, anybody want to respond to what they heard? I would just like to say for Mr. Hall, yeah, it's great putting it into a dedicated fund. You and I worked on something called the Economic Development Fund years ago, and what did we do? We made it a regular occurrence to have to come over here and demand the county show us why they were taking money out of that fund for things that wasn't economic development, right? So again, great plans, great ideas. It always comes down to the enforcement and the follow-through, you know, and that's the whole thing. And that's why I said, I started off by saying the frustration is we set policy, but that policy tends to be affected by eddies and currents caused other places or whatever, so. And I personally would say the concept of when a road gets to like 9 or 10 to boot the density thing, I mean, that's a compelling argument, you know. So if everything is at 6, then you go with density, or 7, but once you get into the parts where the roads are really deteriorating, then it might be, you know, that the density is kicked out of the formula. So I think that makes sense to look at that in the future. It's my 2 cents. Yes, sir, Commissioner Kennard.
I'm sorry, I thought you were
No,
done.
no,
I was
I'm
trying
done.
to catch your
I'm done.
Mr. Hunter had given me this pack of information that I think all of us had gotten. Very, very useful, great information. I actually, before Larry Brock left, I sat down with him and asked him about this stuff. And he essentially advised exactly what Mr. Hunter was alluding to, and what you did as well, is that the density component in that equation really needs to be addressed or eliminated. That we have gotten, I know I've been on board with supporting the existing equation, because as we've been advised every year, no matter which formula you pick, it's going to be wrong. But what we need to be thinking about is long-term, how do we save these roads that are still savable, that are still salvageable? You know, politically, it's probably more favorable to stick with the existing formula, because you make more people happy that they've got new blacktop in front of their house. Fiscally, it makes more sense to save the roads that we can still salvage. Those that, you know, maybe they're 8s and 9s. I guess at 10, it's a total rebuild at that point. I don't know. But what can be saved, you know, those resources should go in that direction. As far as setting up an infrastructure account, I'd be all in favor of that. You know, maybe look at the, as Commissioner Carnahan has suggested, all the revenues from new growth go into that account. We can look at the true-up money. You know, maybe that money goes into that until we get that infrastructure account to the annual number that it needs to be to take care of our infrastructure needs. Then if we've got, you know, whether it's, you know, out at the Lecanto government building, or it's a sheriff's office, or somebody, or somebody else comes to us and says, we need more staff, we need more of this. Well, that directly relates to a millage rate increase. We're not artificially buying that down or covering that with this money or this money or this money, and now all of a sudden we've got no money for infrastructure. So I would, you know, when that point comes, I would support setting up that account and directing funds to go to that account to take care of these infrastructure needs. Yep,
That's
I'm
it.
done. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone down this way? Any comments on what the speakers had to say? Okay, well, looks like we've had that. We've completed everything on our agenda for this meeting. I will remind everybody that we'll be back here for our regular meeting at 1 o'clock for our regular BOCC meeting, and also we have a special library governing board meeting scheduled at approximately 1:15. So we'll adjourn the workshop, and see everyone back here at 1 o'clock.
I apologize for running late. I had a badge emergency.